The discovery. Chief archaeologist Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the excavation site, her eyes fixed on the massive door that had just been uncovered beneath the red soil of Kepler 186f. After 3 years of digging, what her team had initially thought to be natural rock formations had revealed themselves to be the entrance to something far more significant. Another dead end, I assume. The voice belonged to High Commissioner Zixtal, the Arcturian representative overseeing the expedition. His crystalline form sparkled under the dim light of the distant sun, multiple faceted eyes regarding the site with barely concealed disdain. Sarah bit back a sharp retort. The Arcturians had been among the most vocal critics of her research grant, arguing that exploring primitive worlds was a waste of Galactic Council resources. Actually, Commissioner, we've detected energy readings from behind this structure. Active energy readings. That got his attention. All 6 of his eyes focused on her instruments. Impossible. This planet shows no signs of technological development within the last 1,000,000 years. Sarah activated her holopad, projecting a 3-dimensional scan of the structure before them. The door is made of an unknown alloy. Our dating puts it at roughly 100,000 years old, yet it shows no signs of degradation. More importantly, she highlighted several points on the scan. These are quantum signature markers. Whoever built this had mastered quantum engineering before your species had achieved spaceflight. Zixtal's crystalline form darkened slightly, the Arcturian equivalent of a frown. Open it. The team spent the next 6 hours working on the door's locking mechanism. It wasn't until Sarah noticed the peculiar arrangement of symbols along its edge that she understood. "It's not a lock," she announced. "It's a puzzle. Look at the mathematical sequence." The symbols, when viewed correctly, formed a simple progression. Sarah input the next logical number in the sequence, and for the first time in 100,000 years, the door began to move. The chamber beyond was vast, stretching at least a kilometer into the planet's crust. But it wasn't the size that left everyone speechless. It was what filled it. Row upon row of sleek machines lined the walls, their purpose unclear, but their design unmistakably advanced. "Preliminary analysis," announced Dr. Raj Patel, Sarah's second-in-command, his voice trembling with excitement. "The technology here, it's beyond anything in our current database. The quantum signatures suggest capabilities we've only theorized about. Whoever built this place, they weren't primitive. They were far beyond even our current level of advancement." Zixtal moved through the chamber, his crystalline form reflecting off the ancient machines. If such an advanced civilization existed, why is there no record of them? Where did they go? Sarah had moved to what appeared to be a central console. Unlike the door, its interface was remarkably straightforward. As she studied it, she felt a strange sense of familiarity. The layout, the ergonomics, something about it seemed natural to her. "Commissioner," she called out, "I think I can activate it." "Impossible," Zixtal declared. "Our best xenotechnologists take years to decode ancient interfaces. You can't possibly." Sarah's hand was already moving across the console. The chamber hummed to life, and above them, a holographic display materialized. The symbols that appeared were unlike anything in the Galactic Council's records, yet Sarah felt her blood run cold as she recognized them. "By the stars," Raj whispered, "those are numbers. Earth numbers. Arabic numerals." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. This facility wasn't built by some unknown alien civilization. The mathematical patterns, the ergonomics, the familiar design principles, they all pointed to one incredible conclusion. "This installation," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "was built by humans." Zixtal's form pulsed with dismissive light. "Ridiculous. Your species only achieved spaceflight a few centuries ago. You were still using combustion engines when my people had already established colonies across 3 star systems." But Sarah was barely listening. The console had begun revealing more information, and with each new piece of data, the picture became clearer. This wasn't just some random outpost. This was something far more significant. "It's a library," she announced. "No, more than that. It's a vault. A repository of human technology and knowledge from a time we've forgotten." She looked up at the vast chamber with new eyes. "Commissioner, we've been wrong about everything. Human civilization didn't begin a few thousand years ago. We had already reached the stars once before, achieved things that even now we can barely comprehend. Then what happened to this supposed advanced human civilization?" Zixtal demanded. Before Sarah could respond, a new hologram appeared above them, a recording that had waited 100,000 years to be played. The figure that appeared was unmistakably human, wearing clothing that seemed both ancient and futuristic. "If you're seeing this," the recording began, "then humanity has finally returned to the stars. We hoped this day would come, but we couldn't be certain. What we did know was that we had to preserve something for you to find. A legacy, a warning, and most importantly, the tools you'll need for what's coming." The chamber fell silent as the implications of those words sank in. Sarah Chen stood in the heart of humanity's forgotten past, realizing that she hadn't just made the archaeological discovery of a lifetime. She had uncovered the first piece of a mystery that would shake the very foundations of human history and humanity's place in the galaxy. And somewhere, deep in the vault's databases, a countdown had begun. Hidden legacy. The next 48 hours transformed the excavation site into a hive of activity. News of the discovery had spread through official channels, bringing dozens of researchers from across the Galactic Council. Sarah watched from her makeshift command center as anti-grav platforms carried scanning equipment into the vault, their lights creating an ethereal dance in the ancient chamber. "They're still laughing, Reg said, joining her with 2 cups of synthetic coffee. "The Arcturian Science Academy just released a statement suggesting this is all an elaborate hoax." Sarah accepted the coffee with a tired smile. She hadn't slept since the vault's activation, too consumed with decoding the vast amounts of data now streaming from its systems. Let them laugh. The evidence is speaking for itself. On her holoscreen, another section of the ancient database was decrypting itself. The vault's AI, primitive by modern standards but remarkably robust, had been programmed to release information gradually, preventing information overload. Each new revelation painted a more astounding picture of humanity's forgotten past. Dr. Chen, a young researcher, burst into the command center, her eyes wide with excitement. "You need to see this. Section C7 just opened up." Sarah followed her through the sprawling facility. As they walked, she noted how the vault systems seemed to respond to human presence, lights brightening, dormant displays flickering to life. It was as if the entire facility was slowly waking from a long slumber. C7 turned out to be a massive circular chamber dominated by what appeared to be a star map. But unlike modern galactic charts, this one showed configurations that didn't match any known star patterns. "At first we thought the projector was malfunctioning," the researcher explained. "But then we realized these are correct. They're just old, really old. The star patterns match what our galaxy would have looked like roughly 100,000 years ago." Sarah studied the ancient map with growing amazement. Scattered throughout it were thousands of points marked in a distinctive way. Human colonies, she realized. Their civilization hadn't just reached the stars. They had spread throughout the galaxy. "There's more," the researcher continued, manipulating the controls. The map zoomed in on a particular sector, highlighting what appeared to be shipping lanes and defense perimeters. They weren't alone out there. "Look at these boundary markers. They were interacting with other species. Some as allies, some," she paused, "some as enemies." Before Sarah could respond, an alert sounded from her communicator. Zixtal's voice carried an unusual note of urgency. "Dr. Chen, your presence is required in the primary archives. Immediately." She found the Arcturian commissioner standing before a newly activated display, his crystalline form unusually still. The screen showed what appeared to be technical specifications, but the design was like nothing Sarah had ever seen. "Explain this," Zixtal demanded. Sarah studied the schematics. They depicted some kind of massive construction project. Multiple projects, actually, spread across dozens of star systems. The scale was staggering. Their defense installations, she realized, reading through the ancient text. Some kind of automated response system. But defending against what? "That's not the concerning part," Zixtal said. His form pulsed with agitation. "Look at the power signatures." Sarah's eyes widened as she processed the numbers. "That's impossible. These energy readings, they're higher than anything we can generate even today. The power requirements alone would require technology far beyond what your species should have possessed," Zixtal finished. "Yet here is the proof that not only did you have it, you built it on a scale that dwarfs anything the Council has ever attempted." He turned all 6 eyes on her. "The question is, Dr. Chen, what were your ancestors so afraid of that they needed such power?" As if in response to his question, a new section of the database unlocked itself. The screen filled with warning symbols, and a recording began to play. The same human figure from before, but this time his expression was grave. "If you've reached this point in the archives, you've seen evidence of what we built. The defense grid, the quantum arrays, the gravity engines. We created weapons of unprecedented power, pushed science to its absolute limits. Not out of choice, but necessity. Because we discovered something out there in the dark between the stars, something that had already destroyed 1,000 civilizations before us." The recording paused, and new images appeared. Sensor readings, battle reports, evacuation orders. Sarah felt her blood run cold as she began to understand what she was seeing. "The thread," the recording continued. "That's what we called them, because they wove themselves through the fabric of space itself. They weren't alive, not in any way we could understand. They weren't dead either. They simply were. And they consumed everything in their path." Zixtal's crystalline form had darkened to an almost black shade. "This is impossible. The Council has explored every corner of known space. We would have found evidence of such a threat." "Would you?" Sarah asked quietly, still reading through the ancient reports. "According to this, the thread didn't leave evidence. They didn't just destroy civilizations. They erased them. Completely. No ruins, no artifacts, no traces in the geological record. Just nothing." The recording continued. "We fought them for 300 years. We won battles, lost others. But eventually we realized we couldn't defeat them, not permanently. So we made a choice, a terrible choice. New schematics appeared, showing technology that made even the defense installations look primitive by comparison." Sarah struggled to understand what she was seeing, but one thing was clear. It was an apparatus of unprecedented scale. "We found a way to push them back, to seal them away in a pocket of subspace. But the cost..." The figure in the recording looked haunted. "The cost was our civilization, our knowledge, our history, everything we had built, everything we had become. We had to sacrifice it all to power the barrier." Sarah felt her legs go weak as the implications hit her. "We didn't lose our civilization," she whispered. "We gave it up, deliberately, to save everything. The barrier won't hold forever," the recording continued. "We calculated it would last roughly 100,000 years. Long enough, we hoped, for humanity to rise again, to rediscover space travel, to find these vaults and the knowledge we left behind. Because you'll need it all. The thread are still out there, still waiting, and when the barrier fails..." The recording ended, but another system had activated. In the center of the room, a holographic countdown appeared, showing numbers that made Sarah's heart stop. "Raj," she called out, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror building inside her. "Get me a secure link to Earth. Now." "What is it?" Zixtal demanded. "What are those numbers?" Sarah looked at the countdown. then back at the schematics of humanity's ancient defenses. That's how long we have until the barrier fails. Until the thread return. She met the Arcturian's gaze. We have less than 1 year to prepare for an enemy that nearly destroyed us at the height of our power. And this time, we're not alone. The whole galaxy is at risk. The Vault's systems continued their slow awakening, revealing more of humanity's forgotten legacy with each passing moment. But now it wasn't just knowledge they were racing to recover, it was survival itself. And somewhere, in the spaces between reality, something stirred in its long imprisonment, sensing that its time was finally approaching. Awakening. The emergency session of the Galactic Council stretched into its 4th hour. Sarah stood before the assembled representatives of 300 species, her voice growing hoarse as she presented the evidence found in the vault. Behind her, holographic displays showed the ancient human defense systems, power readings, and most importantly, the countdown. With all due respect, Dr. Chen, the Centaurian delegate interrupted, his tentacles writhing with skepticism. You're asking us to believe that not only did humans possess technology far beyond their current capabilities, but they sacrificed it all to save the galaxy from some mysterious threat that conveniently left no evidence. The lack of evidence is the evidence, Sarah countered. Look at our own archaeological records. We've found ruins from civilizations dating back millions of years, yet there's a complete blank period starting around 100,000 years ago. No ruins, no artifacts, no traces of any advanced species. Don't you find that strange? High Commissioner Zixtal, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I have personally verified the authenticity of the Vault's data. The quantum signatures cannot be faked. The technology there is real, and it is far beyond our current understanding. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Sarah used the moment to bring up new data on the displays. We've located more vaults, 17 so far, spread across different sectors. Each contains pieces of our ancient technology, and more importantly, components of the defense system we'll need to reconstruct. And what of these thread creatures? Asked the Regelian ambassador. You speak of them as a threat, yet you can't even explain what they are. Before Sarah could respond, the chamber's lights flickered. The main display screen crackled with interference, then stabilized to show a face she recognized. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, her colleague overseeing the excavation of a newly discovered vault in the Ta City system. Sarah. Elena's voice was panicked. We found something. Something active. It's showing us. The transmission cut out for a moment. When it returned, Elena had been replaced by something else. The council chamber fell silent as ancient footage began to play. The quality was surprisingly clear, showing what appeared to be a space battle, but unlike anything in recorded history. On one side were ships of clearly human design, massive vessels bristling with weapons that bent space itself. On the other, Sarah felt her breath catch. The thread didn't use ships. They moved through space like living tears in reality, each one a kilometer long, their forms shifting between dimensions in ways that hurt to look at. Where they touched human vessels, matter simply ceased to exist, replaced by impossible geometries. Now you see them, a new voice said. Sarah turned to find a hologram of the vault's original creator standing beside her. The AI had chosen to manifest itself. This is what we fought, what we died fighting, what we finally managed to trap, but could never truly defeat. The council chamber had erupted into chaos. Representatives were shouting questions, demands, expressions of disbelief. But Sarah's attention was drawn to another alert flashing on her pad. She opened it to find a message from Raj. Multiple vaults activating simultaneously. Something's happening. The AI's hologram flickered. The awakening has begun. The vault sensed the weakening of the barrier. They're preparing for what comes next. What do you mean, preparing? Sarah demanded. Before the AI could answer, the floor beneath them trembled. Across the galaxy, deep beneath the surface of 17 worlds, ancient machinery was coming to life. In orbit around dead stars, and hidden in gas giant atmospheres, massive structures were shedding their camouflage, revealing themselves for the first time in 100,000 years. The defense grid, the AI explained. What's left of it? We couldn't preserve it all. The power requirements were too great. But we saved the most important pieces, hid them where the thread couldn't find them, even if they broke free early. New data was flooding Sarah's pad. Reports from across council space of enormous structures appearing seemingly out of nowhere. The Arcturus defense platform, the Sirius array, the Orion shield generator, pieces of a vast machine designed to fight an enemy that existed partially outside of reality itself. But they're not complete, Sarah realized, studying the schematics. Parts are missing, destroyed or lost over time. Correct, the AI confirmed. The system requires 3 things to function: power, control interfaces, and most importantly, human operators. Your ancestors built these machines to respond to human neural patterns. Only your species can control them effectively. The implications hit the council like a physical blow. Humanity, dismissed for centuries as technological newcomers, now held the key to the galaxy's survival. The very species they had laughed at would have to save them all. How long? The Regellian ambassador asked, all trace of skepticism gone from his voice. Sarah checked the countdown. 8 months, 4 days until the barrier fails completely. But according to these readings, it's already weakening. We're detecting quantum distortions consistent with the historical records. They're trying to break through early. The AI nodded. The thread are patient, but they can sense freedom approaching. They'll test the barrier, look for weak points. You'll see signs soon. Ships disappearing, small colonies going dark. Then it will escalate. What do you need? Zixtal asked. For the first time since Sarah had known him, the Arcturian's voice held no trace of condescension. Whatever resources humanity requires, the Council will provide them. Sarah looked at the schematics of the defense grid, then at the footage still playing of humanity's ancient battle against the thread. Everything, she said simply. We need everything you can give us. And even then, it might not be enough. The AI's hologram smiled sadly. It never is. But humanity has faced these odds before. And this time, you're not alone. As if to emphasize the point, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. A sensor station at the edge of known space had gone dark, its last transmission showing impossible readings in the quantum layer of spacetime. The thread were stirring, and the galaxy had 8 months to prepare for their return. 8 months to rebuild technology that had taken centuries to perfect. 8 months to train humans to use weapons of unimaginable power. Sarah looked out at the assembled council representatives, seeing fear in their alien faces, but also determination. We'll need to begin immediately, she said. Everything else is secondary now. If we fail, there won't be a galaxy left to save. The ancient vault AI nodded in approval. The time for doubt and ridicule was past. Now came the true test, whether humanity could rise to become what they once were, and whether the galaxy could unite in time to face the nightmare that lurked between dimensions. The awakening had begun. The only question was whether it had come too late. Rising storm. 6 months later, the orbital shipyards above Earth had become something out of humanity's ancient past. Massive structures took shape in the void, their designs pulled from the vault archives and modified with modern innovations. Sarah watched from the observation deck of humanity's new flagship, the Phoenix, as another defense platform came online. Neural interface testing complete, Raj reported, removing the connection leads from his temples. Like many humans, he had volunteered for the integration program. The ancient systems are responding better than expected. It's almost as if they were waiting for us. They were. The Vault AI's hologram materialized beside them. They had taken to calling him Atlas, after the ancient guardian of myth. Your ancestors designed these weapons to work with human consciousness specifically. The thread exists partially outside normal spacetime. Fighting them requires intuition as much as technology. Sarah nodded, studying the latest reports. The signs of the thread's impending return were becoming impossible to ignore. 17 outposts had gone dark in the past month alone. Quantum distortions were appearing with increasing frequency, and ships were reporting strange readings on the edges of known space. Commander Chen. A young lieutenant burst onto the bridge, face pale. Priority transmission from the Arcturus defense platform. The main screen activated, showing a scene that made Sarah's blood run cold. A tear was forming in space itself, reality warping around its edges in impossible ways. As they watched, tendrils of something that couldn't exist in normal space began pushing through. "It's happening," Atlas said quietly. "They're testing the barrier, looking for weak points." Sarah's hands flew across the control interface, connecting with the Phoenix's quantum core. The neural link hummed to life, and suddenly she could feel the ship as if it were an extension of her own body. "All stations, battle positions. This is not a drill." The Phoenix's engines flared to life, its ancient weapons charging with power that made modern antimatter drives look like children's toys. Across the sector, other human-crewed vessels responded to the call, moving to intercept the dimensional breach. Multiple thread signatures detected, Raj announced, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. They're bigger than the historical records indicated. Through the neural link, Sarah could see them clearly. The thread moved like living equations, their forms violating every law of physics. Where they touched normal space, reality itself seemed to fray and unravel. "Atlas," Sarah called out, "we need options." The AI's hologram flickered as it accessed the ancient combat databases. "The defense grid isn't complete. We're operating at 60% capacity at best. But the quantum resonance cannons should still be effective. You'll need to coordinate with the other ships. The thread can only be trapped if you hit them from multiple vectors simultaneously." Sarah sent the targeting data through the neural network, feeling rather than seeing the other human commanders acknowledge the information. The ancient weapons hummed with power, creating distortions in spacetime that matched the thread's own impossible geometry. "All ships on my mark," Sarah commanded. Through the neural link, she could feel the fear and determination of every human crew member. They had trained for this, but simulation was one thing, reality was another. Fire. The quantum resonance cannons activated simultaneously, their beams intersecting at precisely calculated points. Where they met, space itself seemed to fold, creating pockets of altered reality that trapped the thread entities. For a moment, it seemed to work. Then everything went wrong. The thread didn't react like the historical records predicted. Instead of being contained, they seemed to absorb the energy, using it to tear larger holes in the barrier. More of them began pushing through, their forms even more impossible than before. "They've evolved," Atlas realized, his hologram showing clear concern. 100,000 years in the barrier. "They've adapted." "Fall back," Sarah ordered, but it was too late. One of the escort ships vanished, not destroyed but simply erased from existence, leaving behind a space that hurt to look at. The thread were fully emerging now, their kilometer-long forms twisting through dimensions as they advanced on the human fleet. "We need to warn Earth," Raj said, his hand steady on the controls despite the chaos around them. "If they've adapted to the old defenses." Sarah was already sending the emergency signal, but her mind was racing through the historical records stored in the Phoenix database. Something about this seemed familiar, the way the thread moved, the pattern of their attack. "Atlas," she called out, "show me the final battle, the one where we originally trapped them." The AI complied, projecting footage onto the bridge screens. Sarah watched intently, comparing the ancient battle to what was happening now. Then she saw it. They're not stronger, she realized. They're desperate. Look at how they're moving. They're not trying to consume everything like before. They're looking for something specific. The thread entities had indeed changed their pattern, ignoring some ships while aggressively pursuing others. Sarah focused the Phoenix's sensors, analyzing their movements through the neural link. The pattern became clear. They were attacking ships with the strongest quantum signatures. They're hunting power sources, she announced. They need energy to break through completely. That's why they've adapted. They're starving. Atlas's hologram brightened with understanding. Of course, the barrier doesn't just contain them. It isolates them from the energy they need to exist in our reality. They're not attacking. They're feeding. Sarah's mind raced with the implications. If the thread needed energy to fully manifest, then maybe all ships, power down quantum weapons, switch to conventional drives only. Are you insane? Raj demanded. We'll be defenseless. Trust me, Sarah said, her hands flying across the controls. Atlas, can we reconfigure the quantum resonance cannons? Instead of trying to trap the thread, what if we created a vacuum? A space with zero quantum energy. The AI's calculations took only seconds. It's possible, but risky. You'd have to get very close to them. And if it doesn't work, we're dead anyway. Sarah finished. She opened a channel to all human crewed ships in the sector. This is Commander Chen. I need volunteers for a close-range operation. High risk, but it might be our only chance to understand what we're really fighting. The responses came immediately. Despite the terror of facing an enemy that could erase them from existence, not a single human crew refused. Sarah felt a surge of pride through the neural network. Humanity had not forgotten its courage, even if it had forgotten its history. All right, she said, plotting an intercept course with the nearest thread entity. Let's remind these things why they needed to trap us in the first place. The Phoenix's engines flared to life, leading a formation of human ships toward an enemy that had haunted their species' deepest racial memories for 100,000 years. The real war was about to begin. And this time, humanity would not be caught unprepared. They had 2 months until the barrier fell completely. 2 months to find a way to fight an enemy that had evolved beyond their ancient defenses. 2 months to save not just humanity, but all of reality itself. The storm was rising, and Sarah Chen was about to discover that the thread's true nature was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Humanity's dawn. The Phoenix hung in the void between stars, its quantum engines silent. Around it, a dozen other human-crewed ships maintained formation, their conventional drives barely registering on the energy spectrum. Below them, the thread entity twisted through space-time, its kilometer-long form searching for signs of the energy it craved. Recording everything, Raj whispered, though sound didn't matter in the neural interface. If this goes wrong, at least others will know what happened. Sarah barely heard him. Through the neural link, she was focused entirely on the thread's movements. Something had been bothering her since they discovered the entity's new hunting pattern. The way they moved, the precision of their attacks, it seemed almost familiar. Atlas, she subvocalized through the neural interface, show me the original vault records again. Not the battles, the first contact. The AI complied, projecting the ancient data directly into her mind. Sarah watched as humanity's first encounters with the thread played out. Something caught her attention, a detail she'd missed before. Stop, she commanded. There, enhance that section. The footage zoomed in on a particular thread entity from 100,000 years ago. Its movements were different from the others, more precise, more purposeful. They're not random, she realized. Atlas cross-referenced these movement patterns with known space-time configurations. The AI's calculations took only moments. Match found. The patterns align with Sarah. These are navigation coordinates. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. They're not attacking randomly. They're not even just hunting energy. They're trying to go somewhere specific. Through the neural network, she felt the other ship commanders processing this information. The thread weren't mindless destroyers. They were following a predetermined path. But to where? Before she could pursue that thought, alarms blared across all frequencies. The thread entity below them had suddenly changed direction, moving with terrible purpose toward a new target. Energy spike detected. Raj called out. Massive quantum distortion forming at coordinates 227 Mark 184. Sarah felt her blood run cold as she saw what was happening. The barrier between dimensions was tearing open, far larger than any previous breach. Through it came something that made the other thread entities look tiny by comparison. Mother of God, someone whispered through the neural net. The new arrival was massive, its form stretching across multiple dimensions in ways that defied comprehension. But unlike the other thread, this one seemed to have purpose, intelligence. It reached out with tendrils of impossible geometry, and where it touched, reality itself began to unravel. All ships, maintain position, Sarah ordered, though every instinct screamed at her to flee. Atlas, what are we looking at? The AI's hologram flickered with what looked like genuine fear. This is what your ancestors fought. Not the thread themselves. They were just the advance guard. This is their creator. Through the neural link, Sarah accessed more of the vault's ancient records, and understanding dawned with horrible clarity. The thread weren't invaders. They were tools. Probes sent by something far older and more terrible than humanity had imagined. They're not trying to destroy reality, she said aloud, the pieces finally falling into place. They're trying to reshape it. The coordinates, the precise attacks, they're following a blueprint. Atlas's hologram nodded grimly. Now you understand what your ancestors discovered, why they had to sacrifice everything to stop it. The entity you see before you is not just trying to enter our universe. It's trying to change the fundamental laws of reality itself, to remake everything in its own image. The massive entity reached out again, its impossible form sending waves of distortion through space-time. Ships that had survived battles with the thread began disappearing, their very existence being rewritten at a quantum level. How did we stop it before? Sarah demanded, desperate for answers as she watched reality itself being unmade around them. We didn't, Atlas admitted. Not really. The barrier your ancestors created didn't just trap the thread and their master. It isolated them in a pocket of space-time where they couldn't affect our reality. But now they've had 100,000 years to adapt, to evolve. The old methods won't work again. Sarah watched through the Phoenix's sensors as more ships vanished, erased not just from existence, but from history itself. The entity was reaching further, its influence spreading like a cancer through space-time. Then she noticed something through the neural link, a pattern in the way reality was being rewritten. The entity wasn't just changing things randomly. It was following rules, laws of its own impossible physics. Atlas, she called out, an idea forming. The quantum resonance cannons. They work by matching the thread's dimensional frequency, right? Correct. But as we've seen, they've adapted too. What if we didn't try to match their frequency? Sarah interrupted. What if we did the opposite? Created a feedback loop of normal space-time. The AI's calculations raced through the neural network. Theoretically possible, but the power requirements would be enormous. You'd need to channel the energy of multiple stars just to. The defense grid, Sarah said. It's not complete, but what if we linked all the remaining installations? Used them to create a massive resonance field of normal space-time. Understanding spread through the neural network as other commanders grasped her plan. They weren't trying to destroy the entity or trap it. They were going to try to force it to obey the laws of our universe. It would be a one-way trip, Atlas warned. The power surge would burn out every system we have. And if it doesn't work, there won't be a reality left to save. Sarah opened a channel to all remaining ships and installations. This is Commander Chen. I need every human crew to link up through the neural network. We're going to synchronize the entire defense grid for one massive pulse. The responses came immediately. Humanity once again proving its greatest strength, the ability to unite in the face of impossible odds. Through the neural network, Sarah felt thousands of minds connecting, their consciousness merging with the ancient technology in a way their ancestors had designed but never fully achieved. The entity seemed to sense what they were planning. It reached out with its reality-warping power, trying to unmake them before they could act. But humanity had faced extinction before and survived. They would not go quietly now. All ships, all installations, fire. The combined power of humanity's rebuilt defense grid poured through the neural network, guided by thousands of linked human minds. The quantum resonance cannons fired not with destructive force, but with pure, undiluted normal spacetime, creating a wave of reality that crashed against the entity's impossible geometries. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Then the entity screamed, a sound that existed not in space, but in the minds of every being for 1,000 light years. Its form began to collapse, forced to conform to the laws of our universe, or cease to exist entirely. The thread entities themselves began to dissolve, their impossible forms unable to maintain coherence in strictly normal spacetime. The tears in reality started to heal, the natural laws of physics reasserting themselves with devastating force. Through the neural network, Sarah felt systems burning out across the defense grid. Ships were losing power, installations going dark, but they had to maintain the field for just a few moments longer. With a final reality-shaking shriek, the entity collapsed in on itself, its form compressed by the laws of physics it had tried to override. Where it had been, space-time snapped back to normal, leaving behind nothing but the echoes of its passing. The thread were gone, not trapped this time, but transformed, forced to exist according to the same laws as everything else in our universe. They had simply ceased to be. Sarah opened her eyes to find the Phoenix running on emergency power, its ancient systems burned out beyond repair. Through the viewport, she could see other ships in similar condition, their crews exhausted but alive. "Did we win?" Raj asked weakly, removing his neural interface leads. Sarah checked the sensors. What was left of them? Space-time had stabilized. The quantum distortions were gone. And most importantly, reality itself was once again operating according to its proper laws. "We won," she confirmed, "but not the way our ancestors did. They tried to fight impossible physics with impossible physics. We won by making the impossible conform to the possible." Atlas's hologram flickered one last time. "And in doing so, you've proved why the Thread's master was wrong. It thought it could remake reality in its own image. It never understood that the true power of this universe lies not in breaking its laws, but in understanding them." As rescue ships began arriving from across Council space, Sarah looked out at the stars, unchanging, unwarped, beautiful in their simplicity. Humanity had faced its ancient enemy and triumphed not through superior firepower or impossible technology, but through the one thing that had always set them apart: the ability to adapt, to understand, and to bring order to chaos. The galactic community would never again doubt humanity's place among the stars. They had proved themselves not just equal to their forgotten legacy, but superior to it. They had faced down gods and won by refusing to play by their rules. A new dawn was rising for humanity and the galaxy. And this time, they would face it together, not as separate species, but as guardians of a reality they had all fought to preserve. The ancient vault's final message played one last time through the dying speakers. Remember what we were. Remember what we sacrificed. But most importantly, remember what you became. The stars are yours now. Keep them safe. Sarah Chen looked at the burned-out neural interface, then at the faces of her crew, tired, scared, but proud. They had done exactly that. And whatever came next, humanity would face it not with fear of the impossible, but with the confidence of those who had made the impossible bow to the possible. The age of thread was over. The age of humanity had truly begun.